Welcome to part 3 of MySQL PHP search programming. In this part we will discuss and apply the SQL syntax for searching MySQL databases and offer up some example code. We will be searching the example tables that we all made using that script that we had in part 1 of this series. Before we go any further, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with the following MySQL syntax if you're not already familiar with it. And all of this syntax can be studied and researched at the MySQL, the reference manual online for MySQL documentation, you know what I'm saying? Like syntax is used for searching MySQL database tables, and it has similar functionality to the regex pattern matching of MySQL. This type of search method will give exact results where a search query is found, and one can order the rendered results by the date field or any other field that happens to be in that column list. And the SQL syntax would read something like this. Select all from table, your target table, where the target field in that table is like whatever your search query variable is. And you use your %sign on both sides to let the query know that you want the whole phrase matched. The match and against syntax is how we can run full text searches. That query reads something like this. Select all from the target table where match whatever field that you want. You can have multiple fields separated by commas here that you want to look inside of to see if there's a match against this target search query or the phrase that the person is searching for. Goes right there. And since we set up our database table to have a full text index for the title and for the body of our pages and our blogs, that means we can use this method and we'll get some results. And this method is more for having a natural language search that can be fine-tuned by the programmer, which is you, and ordered by relevancy descending. So that means it will give you results, and the highest relevancy for the target phrase that the person is searching for will be on top. So it'll be ordered by relevancy descending if you set up your match and against syntax correctly for a full text search. And this method requires that you have full text indexes set on the columns in the database that you want to match within. And you'll notice in video 1 of this series, when we created our tables, our exercise tables for this whole little series, that they had full text index already set up on them in the create syntax. But if you have existing tables and you want to use this kind of syntax, then you would have to add your full text indexes after the fact. Now I put union and as syntax together, but they're not really related, but I'm using them together in this scenario for our search. What union does, it will allow you to take, you can see here I have one select query, and it can be any kind of select query that you want. And then I have another select query, and what I'm doing is wrapping each one in parentheses. And in between them I just put the word union, and that allows me to combine this query with this query's result set. And you can see here I wrote union combines multiple queries into one large result set. Now as is not directly related to union, but it comes in handy when you're using it, because you can see in our tables we have two tables, and I purposely didn't name them both title for the whatever page's title it is. I named it page title, and then in the blog table I named it blog title. So I'm showing how to use the as syntax to select the page title as the word title, really as the name title. So you can see I wrote down here, as allows you to set an alias name for any field names. So I'm creating an alias name called title for my page title field. Has an alias name now called title. And my blog title field has an alias name now of title as well. And that's selecting from the blog table. This select is for the pages table. This select is for the blog table. So in the result set, I can just target the alias name of title for both of them. Okay, now enough talking. Let's go to the code, man. And then we'll test how it works. We'll release the code, and then you guys can mess around with it on your own. Okay, here we are back again with our same search.php page that we created in part 2 of this lesson series. Alright, this is that same page, and I added some code to it already, but it pretty much looks the way it did when we left off in part 2 because I have all the code that I applied all packaged up into these little blocks here, which I will expand and explain all the code. Then I'll give the code to you guys to play with if you want it. Now, the first thing I did was I added the little part that forces script errors and warnings to show during production only. So you can see that code's right there, those 2 lines, just like we had in the first script of this series. And then we initialized the search output variable. And this is the same code we had before, where we were seeing if the posted search field is set and it has a value. And we discussed that in video part 2. Now all of the new code that I applied is wrapped up in this block right here. And everything else in the page you remember from video 2, okay? So now let me expand this block right here, and we'll discuss everything that's within it. Okay, let's expand that out. And the first thing we're going to do inside of that if condition is we're going to filter the search query user input. So if I open that line up, you'll see exactly what it's doing. We're using the preg replace function in PHP to do a case insensitive replace for everything but letters, space character, numbers, and the question mark. If you want to allow any other strange characters in there, this is where you type them in. You want to allow that one, exclamation, whatever you want. But I'm doing that just to disallow things like quote marks and any characters that I don't want to allow. Like those, I won't even allow those. But I will allow the question mark and the exclamation. But you can assign any more characters that you want to allow right here. So we replace anything but these characters that we want to allow with nothing. And that's the second parameter of preg replace. You just claim what you want to replace those things with. In this case, we want to just remove them, so we replace with nothing. And the string that we want to target all those replacements on is the posted variable of search query. Okay? So the posted variable that's coming from, and you also want to filter this variable because the person might put in SQL injection attacks and things like that. They might try and drop your whole database if you allow them right through your search form. So you got to make sure you filter this input. Now here is where we're setting up the logic. Let me put this down. Don't need that. Here's where we're setting up the logic. These if and else if condition statements here is where we're setting up the logic for that filter. So if we go in design view, remember this filter we put in to allow people to search only within certain tables if they want to? That's where we're setting this up. So if the post filter 1, and you can see filter 1 is this select field. So if it's whole site, you can see if post filter 1 equals whole site, then we run this code block right here. Else, if post filter 1 is equal to pages, then we know they just want to search in the pages section of the site or the pages table of the site, and we run this code here, which sets up a different query. Else, if the filter 1 is equal to blog, then we know the user wants to search only within the blog section of our site, so we set up a different query here. Now the whole site query is a tricky one because you have to have a union or some kind of join table query and search at the same time. So that's really the whole site query is going to be the trickiest one. This one's a little bit easier, and so is this one because you're only targeting one table in these. This one is a little bit tricky because we're targeting the pages table and the blogs table, and we're combining it all into one large result set. So that's why it's a little bit tricky. And we'll discuss it all with you, don't worry about it. We're using the union and the as syntax if it happens to be the whole site that they want to search in. Now before I open up these 3 little code blocks and explain them, let's move on down a little bit to see what happens after we set up the right query that we need according to the filter that the person's wanting to search by. What happens after that? After we get the query that we want, we can connect to the database. So you use your connect to MySQL file there, and then you run your MySQL query with the SQL command, which is dynamic. It's dynamically made within these if and else condition statements, and that's how you set up your filters. And if the query has any problems, you'll get the MySQL error and the die functional fire off, killing the script, and you get the MySQL error. And the next line is we get the count from how many items are coming back in the result set for what the person searched for. How many items were found. And the count, you can get that easily enough by running MySQL numRows function on the query variable. Then the last little bit is we say if the count is greater than 1, that means there is at least one result, then we're going to build some search output for the page. Else, we're just going to put search output to say 0 results for the search query that you searched for, blah blah blah, and then another HR tag, which is a horizontal rule, and then we show the SQL command. It's that simple. So here's a horizontal rule. That's just a line going across the screen, and then it'll say 0 results for the thing you searched for, another horizontal line across the screen, and then an SQL command. And I only put the SQL command there for development purposes so you can see exactly what's being queried from your database. Now, if the count happens to be 1, we're going to build some search output. So let's open that up and show you what it consists of. In the search output, the first thing we do is the same thing as if there's 0 results, we're just saying there's 0 results for the search query, and then we show the SQL command. If there are some results, we're doing the same thing with a horizontal line, but we're putting the count number here. We say count results. This will be a number, either 1, 2, 5, 1,000, whatever. It'll be like 384 results for search query. Whatever they searched for will be printed there, and then for your development purposes you can look at the SQL command again. So whether the query gives results or there's 0 results, you're going to see the SQL command and these horizontal rules. Now to get the actual results out, we're going to use the MySQL fetchArray function on the query in a while loop. So through this while loop is how we'll access each thing that is in the results set, each item from the database. We can get the item's ID right there, the item's title right there, and then we build the search output compounded variable. This is a variable that keeps appending to itself, kind of using the dot equal syntax. So all of these items get appended to that, and you can see there's a break tag between each one. And we can output the item ID. You can build navigation links using this item ID to various sections of your site, and yada yada yada. And then the title goes right there. And you can also query out some of the body data if you want, and maybe cut it down to maybe just 200 characters and throw that under the title, where that's not clickable data, but it's just something for the user to read to let them know if that's what they're looking for. But really you would want to have, like Google does it, have the title clickable and then maybe some data under it, but have the title clickable for that ID, for that item, so the person can go read the page or whatever. I'm not going to build this whole application for you. You guys are smart and you can figure it out. Okay, now you know exactly what that's doing, so I'm going to pop that back up into a little package. Now all we have to do is explain these 3 pieces of code blocks here that we didn't open up and explain yet. Now the first one is if the person had a desire to search within the whole site, get all the results from the whole site, all the tables, in one query. Now since that's the most complicated code and it's using the union and the as syntax, I'm going to explain that one last. So let's explain this one first. Else if post filter was for pages. That means, let's say I'm right here. Search for, remember we had, let's see, let's search for Flash, because I had some topics with Flash. Within just the pages, submit query. You see? 2 results for Flash, item ID 3 and item ID 8. The title was Flash Gallery and this title was Flash Website. And here's that little query, the SQL command. Now that little example, or that little test I just did on this little application, I made the scenario where this else if condition statement met true, so it ran. So let me open that up and you can see it now. What we did was we select the ID and the page title, use the alias of title for page title. That way we didn't have to change too many things down here in the output. Remember, in the output you can see I was just referring to the name title and not page title, and I still got the page title. That's because I'm using the alias of title on page title. So basically I'm selecting ID and page title, but I'm using the alias of title for page title. From pages, so I'm selecting ID title from pages, where page title is like the search query. So in my case, I just searched for Flash, so Flash would have been right there. So where the page title is like Flash, or the page body, even all of the text within the articles and pages, where that is like the word Flash, or whatever the key phrase is that the person is searching in. You pull those results out only. Okay, let's package that up. And now you know how to use the alias to change the name of fields and the like syntax. And you saw the results of it. If I go back here and I search for pet bird, which was some of the information in my blog, I type only blog. Now you have two results for pet bird, and I have item ID 4 and 5, new pet bird, and then pet bird died. Those are the two blog entries I have for my pet bird. That is this section meeting true, this if condition. So else if the filter is equal to blog, then we run this code, which is very similar to the code that we just explained. We select ID in the blog title, and the blog title has an alias of title. I'm doing that just like I said before, so I don't have to have different code down here for my output. I can use the same word title from blog, where blog title is like pet bird, or blog body is like pet bird. Okay, now let's pop that one back up in its little package, and now let's explain the tricky one. Now this one is using, let's go back here to our little illustration. This is using union. You can see, remember when I explained how union works? You have one select statement wrapped in parentheses, and then you have the word union, and then you put your next select statement wrapped in parentheses. Union combines multiple queries into one large result set. So knowing that, all I did was I put a select query that's pretty much just like this one for pages and this one for blog down here, but it's wrapped in parentheses. You see, select ID page title as title. I'm using alias again there. From pages, where page title is like search query, or page body is like the search query. And then I union another select statement that's selecting the same things but from the blog. And that's where we're using the union syntax and the aliases together. Now every title that comes out, no matter if it is a blog title or a page title, it's going to have the name title, and I can just target that row output or that name alias for my row output in my while loop. Now I'm going to give you guys one little suggestion or hint. I'm not going to program it in, but a lot of people are going to ask about it. I tell you what, before I pass along this little tidbit of information, let's just call this video done. You can see this application here is running live online, and let's say if I was to search within the whole site for blah blah blah, I should get every result, because remember every one of the pages that I put in and every one of the articles had blah 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 in the end. So if I submit this query, you see I got all 8 pages from my pages table and all 5 pages from my blog table as a result. And it's using that union syntax here, you see. But now here's what I'm talking about. In these result sets here, you're going to want to give links to this page, and you're going to want to give links to this blog page so the person can read the whole thing, because that's what they're looking for, or because things that they were searching for happen to be found within these things. So since you're using a union query and everything's coming out in one result set, your result set, your while loop, is going to have no idea what section of the site to send these people to. So you are going to have no way to know if to send the person to the blog section of the site, to that page ID, or to send them to the pages section of the site. Or maybe you have members section where you're leading to somebody's profile. Your query is going to have to know what section of the site to navigate to send these people to these pages. If you're using a whole site query, so this is what I wanted to discuss. And really, this part of the tutorial is over. I just wanted to give a little bit of extra insight and information into that. If you use this whole site type filter, maybe you should remove that if you're going to have complications programming your and I'll tell you how I would get it done. But if you're going to have complications putting in your navigation links to all these items so the person can click on it and go read that page, you might want to remove whole site. And it's because it's going to be really difficult for your query to know which table this data is coming from. And what you can do to fix that problem is you go into your database and you go into your pages table, and in that table you make a new field that's called what table, and make it have a default value for every row in that table. Make it say pages. Then you go into your and I know I'm probably confusing the crap out of everybody, but it's going to have to be done this way if you want to use this type of whole site filter. If you're using a union query, anything that's like mine, and your database is set up anything like mine, your query is not going to know where to send these people to. You're going to have no way to program the link in correctly. But I'm giving you a fix right now, and man, it's taking forever to talk about it. I'm sorry. What you do is you go into your pages table, you put a new column in, you call it what table. For every one of those rows that gets populated in that table, make sure that has a default value in that column of pages. Then you go into your blog table. You make a new column on that one. You call it what table. In that one, you make sure there's a default value for each blog entry of blog. So you select ID, page title as title, comma, and you select what table from pages. And you also do the same thing in this select. Select ID, blog title as title, comma, what pages from blog, where blah 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 blah.